Nathan Walker was 42 when he realized that some truths don't knock gently. They barge in, shattering your life with a grin. He'd built his life like a fortress, steady job in construction management, a modest house in the suburbs, and a wife, Erin, who at 39 still had that easy laugh that made people feel safe. Or so he thought. The signs were so small at first. Nathan hated himself for missing them. Late phone calls that she answered in the bathroom. A sudden interest in book club nights when she'd never finished a novel in her life. He wanted to believe her. He wanted so badly to believe her. But the truth showed up in the form of an accidental text, a message meant for someone else, landing in Nathan's inbox at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. "I wish you were here instead of him. Last night was perfect. Perfect." Nathan stared at those words for an hour before he quietly packed a bag and left the house. He didn't shout, didn't throw things, didn't even wake Erin. He just left her with her perfect lie. A week later, Nathan's world was a half-empty apartment and a mind full of replays, moments he believed, touches he trusted. He told no one, not his brother, not his closest friend. He wanted the humiliation buried under drywall and overtime hours. But secrets have sharp edges. They don't stay buried. Nathan was scraping old paint off a client's porch when he saw her, Erin, standing at the end of the drive, in the same clothes she'd left his house wearing a week ago. Except now, she didn't look like someone swept away by passion. She looked wrecked. He didn't say her name. He just kept scraping. "Nathan," she called, voice raw. He didn't answer. She stepped closer, flinching at each crunch of gravel. "Nate, please. Can we talk?" He didn't look at her. The hiss of the scraper was the only answer. "I made a mistake," she said, voice cracking. "I was stupid. And She stopped herself. Her arms crossed her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "He took everything. My purse, my card, my phone, all of it." The scraper stopped. Nathan finally turned, eyes cold. "What do you want from me, Erin?" She blinked back, tears, lips trembling. I didn't know where else to go." Nathan laughed, a low, humorless sound that startled her. "You had somewhere else. He was perfect, wasn't he?" She flinched like he'd struck her. But Nathan didn't feel sorry. Not now. Rain started to mist the driveway. Erin looked so small standing there, drenched, mascara running in black rivulets down her cheeks. "I need help," she whispered. Nathan let the silence stretch, tasting the bitter justice of it. He should have shut the door. He should have turned away. But sometimes pity is stronger than pride, and betrayal is messier than clean goodbyes. Nathan tossed the paint scraper onto the tarp. The clang of metal on wood echoed between them, sharp as the silence that followed. Erin stood there shivering, arms wrapped tight around her ribs like she could keep herself from falling apart. He should have felt triumphant. This was the part in every bitter revenge fantasy where the betrayer crawls back, humiliated, broken. But standing here, all Nathan felt was empty. The hollow ache of something too poisoned to ever come back to life. "Where is he now?" Nathan asked finally, voice flat. Erin's eyes darted to the ground. "Gone. He told me he loved me, Nate. He said we'd run away together, start over. But the second I wired him the money from our savings." Nathan's stomach twisted. "Our savings. The house fund, the emergency cash, the life they built, just handed over to a stranger who had used her as easy bait. You gave him our money." The words came out so quiet. Erin almost didn't catch them over the drizzle that turned to steady rain. "I didn't mean to." Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through the cracks in her fake strength. "I thought. He said he needed it to clear debts, so you could what?" Nathan snapped. The anger finally cut through the numbness, hot and sharp. "Live happily ever after. Leave me with nothing while you played out some cheap movie fantasy." Erin's chin dropped. Her shoulders shook. Nathan hated how the sight still punched through his resolve. 5 years ago, he would have taken her in his arms without question. Now, all he saw was the hole she'd burned in the middle of his trust. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please. I have nowhere to sleep. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I know I don't deserve your help, but..." Nathan's fists clenched. He could almost hear Mark, his brother, telling him, "Don't be soft, Nate. Let her lie in the bed she made." But the porch light behind him flickered, a reminder that no matter how much you hate someone, love leaves roots. and sometimes they're too deep to yank out overnight. He stepped aside, just enough for her to slip past him toward the front door. "Don't get comfortable," Nathan said, voice low, rain dripping from his jaw. "One night. That's it." Erin nodded like she'd take scraps of mercy over the cold street. She shuffled past him, soaked shoes leaving tiny dark prints on the clean porch floor. Nathan stayed in the rain, staring after her, wondering if forgiveness was just another word for weakness, and if tonight he'd regret showing any. Nathan stepped inside after her, the door clicking shut behind him like a verdict. The living room smelled the same, faint pine cleaner, leftover paint from when he'd patched the ceiling leak last spring. It was home, but now it felt like neutral ground, some no man's land where neither of them quite belonged. Erin hovered by the couch, dripping rain onto the hardwood. She looked smaller here than she ever did at nightclubs or girls' nights she used to lie about. Now her eyeliner was gone. Her hair clung to her jaw in wet strands, her cheap perfume replaced by the sharp bite of cold air. "You hungry?" Nathan asked stiffly, already moving to the kitchen because he needed something to do with his hands. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He heard her wet shoes squeak as she shuffled to the couch. He didn't tell her to sit. He didn't tell her anything. Nathan opened the fridge and stared inside. Half a leftover lasagna, a few beers, eggs. He grabbed the lasagna, tossed it on a plate, and nuked it in the microwave while rain drummed the roof like an angry reminder that storms don't stay outside just because you wish they would. He could see her reflection in the dark window over the sink, curled up in the corner of the couch, hugging her knees like a scared kid. He hated how familiar it looked, the way she'd curl up after bad dreams, or when her mother used to call and shout about borrowed money. He'd held her then, said, "I've got you." Now, he had no idea who he was looking at. The microwave beeped. He shoved the plate into her hands without a word. Erin flinched at the heat, but didn't complain. She ate in small, frantic bites that told him she really hadn't had a meal in days. Nathan leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching. Every chew, every swallow scraped at the raw spot in his chest. This is the same woman who emptied our savings for another man. The same woman who lied to my face for months. She caught him staring. Her voice was so small, it barely made it across the room. "Thank you." Nathan didn't answer. He didn't know what answer wouldn't make him a liar, too. When she finished, she set the empty plate carefully on the coffee table, like she was afraid it would shatter if she breathed too hard. Nathan jerked his chin toward the hallway. "Guest room. Clean sheets. You stay there. Door stays open." She nodded, hair hiding her eyes. "Okay." He didn't say goodnight. He just watched her gather herself up, piece by piece, and disappear down the hall, leaving Nathan alone in the living room with nothing but the sound of rain and the question he hated most. What the hell do I do now? Nathan didn't sleep that night. He lay on his side of the bed, his bed, he reminded himself, staring at the ceiling fan creaking in its slow orbit. Every few minutes, he thought he heard the guest room door click or soft footsteps in the hallway. But when he strained his ears, there was only the low hum of rain easing into a steady drizzle. Around 3 a.m., he finally gave up. He got up, padded down the hall barefoot. He paused by the guest room door. It was cracked open just like he'd said. Through the gap, he saw Erin curled on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a blanket too thin for the chill that lingered after the storm. He hated the stab of guilt in his gut. She chose this, he reminded himself. She chose him. But the sight of her, shoulders hunched, hair spread across a pillow that wasn't hers, made something old and familiar twist inside him. Memories he didn't want, but couldn't kill. He almost closed the door. Almost. Instead, he turned away, stepping into the kitchen to make coffee he didn't want. The kettle hissed to life, and Nathan leaned on the counter, palms braced against the cold tile. He thought about the look on Erin's face when she confessed how the other man, her perfect savior, had stolen everything she'd given him and vanished. The worst part was, Nathan knew exactly what that felt like, because she'd done the same to him. Different thief, same theft. The kettle clicked off. Nathan poured the coffee black. No sugar. He sipped it standing up, staring through the back window of the yard they used to talk about fencing in for kids they never had. He could almost see ghosts out there, the life they'd planned, the ordinary evenings that turned out to be built on sand. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn crept through the blinds. Somewhere down the hall, he heard the guest room door creak open. He didn't move. Erin's footsteps stopped at the edge of the kitchen. "Nathan." Her voice was a rough whisper. He didn't look at her. "Just sip the coffee. There's more in the pot." She lingered, twisting the hem of the sweatshirt she'd borrowed from his closet. His old college hoodie. The one he'd almost thrown out 100 times, but kept for reasons he'd never bothered to explain. "I'll make it right," she said suddenly. Her voice trembled like a match about to die. "I'll find a way to fix this." Nathan let out a low, humorless laugh, eyes still fixed on the window. "How do you fix trust, Erin? How do you buy that back?" She didn't answer. Maybe because they both knew there wasn't an answer good enough. Erin didn't touch the coffee. She just stood there by the doorway, hugging her arms around herself like she needed to hold her ribs in place. Nathan didn't look at her. He couldn't. He focused on the drip of the faucet instead, each tiny splash loud in the quiet kitchen. "I know I can't fix it overnight," Erin said. Her voice was steadier now, but that tremor was still there underneath, the same tremor that had cracked her confession wide open. "But I can't stay out there. Please, just give me time to prove I'm sorry." Nathan pushed his mug away, the scrape of ceramic on wood sharp enough to make her flinch. He finally lifted his eyes, searching hers for something, truth, maybe, regret, or just the woman he'd loved before all this poison settled into their house. "You're sorry because you lost everything," he said, "not because you gave it away." Erin's lips parted like she might argue, but she didn't. She just dropped her gaze to the floor, her hair falling forward to hide her eyes. "I'll find a job," she whispered. "I'll pay back every dollar he took. I'll sleep on the couch if you want. I don't care. Just please, Nathan. Please don't make me leave." Nathan felt the old ache in his chest tighten like a fist. 5 years together, hundreds of late nights whispering dreams across a dark bedroom. How do you measure betrayal against that? How do you weigh the promise of change against the certainty that trust, once broken, never comes back the same shape? He stood up so fast his chair scraped back on the linoleum. Erin flinched again. Good, he thought. Maybe she should. Maybe she should feel every ounce of the cold he'd felt the second that text landed in his phone. "You stay here," he said at last. "For now. But don't mistake this for forgiveness. This is survival, nothing more." Her shoulders sagged. Relief or shame? He couldn't tell. Maybe both. Nathan grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. "I'm going to work. There's food in the fridge. Don't touch anything that isn't yours." She nodded. She didn't say thank you, and he was glad for that. It would have sounded like another lie. He stepped out into the morning light, letting the door click shut behind him. He didn't look back. He wasn't ready to see if she was still standing there, broken in the doorway, or if she'd already found some new way to twist his mercy into another wound. Nathan's boots hit the wet driveway, each step pulling him further from the suffocating tension he'd left behind. He paused at his truck, hand on the door, and for a second he almost turned back, just to see if she was watching him from the window like she used to when they were good. But he stopped himself. He didn't want to know. He fired up the engine and pulled onto the road, the rumble of the old Chevy grounding him in something real. Work. Work was real. The only thing that made sense now. Numbers, angles, steel beams, they didn't lie. People did. At the site, the crew was already unloading supplies. Marcus, his foreman, shot him a curious look when Nathan climbed out. "You look like you wrestled a tornado, boss." Nathan forced a short laugh. "Yeah, something like that." Marcus handed him a clipboard. "Inspections came through. We're short on drywall again. You want me to run the numbers with Tom?" Nathan nodded, flipping through the pages without really seeing them. His mind was back in that kitchen, the hollow look in Erin's eyes, the sound of her whisper, "Please don't make me leave." "You good, man?" Marcus asked. "You've been off all week. You want to talk?" "No," Nathan said too quickly. He caught himself, sighed, tried to soften it. "I'm good. Just handle the supply run. I'll check the south wall." Marcus didn't push. He knew Nathan wasn't the type to bleed his problems out in the open. Hours passed in sawdust and hammer strikes, the ache in his shoulders better than the ache in his chest. By lunch, he hadn't checked his phone once. He knew she'd be there when he got home, and he hated that a part of him felt calmer knowing she hadn't run again. As he was hauling a bundle of beams to the truck bed, his phone buzzed at last. He fished it from his pocket, expecting a text from Erin. Maybe "thank you" or "I'm sorry" on repeat. It wasn't from her. It was from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know Erin. You deserve to know more. Call me." No name, no details, just that. Nathan stared at the message, thumb hovering over callback. In the distance, a nail gun snapped. A radio played some old country song about lies and whiskey and forgiveness that never comes. Nathan's pulse thudded in his ears. He pocketed the phone, hands trembling just enough to make the beam slip in his grip. Maybe the worst was behind him. Or maybe, he thought grimly, the real betrayal was just starting to show its teeth. Nathan couldn't shake the message. All afternoon, it pulsed in the back of his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch. He checked the number twice between hauling supplies and checking blueprints. No name, no clue who it might be. Just those words, "You deserve to know more." By quitting time, he told himself a dozen reasons not to call back. It's a scam. It's a prank. It's Aaron trying to twist the knife one more time. But when he climbed into his truck and slammed the door shut, the cab felt too quiet. The silence pressed in on him, heavier than the humid dusk air. Before he could lose his nerve, Nathan thumbed, opened his phone, and hit call back. It rang once, twice, then a man's voice, low and tense. "Hello." Nathan's throat tightened. "You texted me. About Aaron." A pause, then a sigh, rough, like the man on the other end hadn't slept any better than Nathan lately. "Yeah, I did. Look, I'm sorry to drop this on you, but you should know. She didn't tell you everything." Nathan stared through the windshield at the dusty job site gate. "Who are you?" "My name's Adam," the voice said. I worked with her at the old catering company before she quit last year. We knew each other." Nathan's jaw clenched. Knew each other. He hated how those words made his stomach twist. "What do you mean, knew?" Adam cleared his throat, as if steeling himself. "She told me you kicked her out. I didn't believe her at first, but then she showed up at my place 2 nights ago, crying, saying you'd thrown her on the street, begging me to help." Nathan's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "She didn't tell me that." "Yeah, well, she didn't tell you a lot. She asked me for money, said she needed it to get back on her feet. I gave her a few hundred. Stupid, I know. But when she left, I found out she took my credit card too." Nathan let out a breath that felt like it scraped his ribs raw. Erin, the woman sobbing for mercy in his guest room, had already tried to squeeze someone else dry the minute he gave her shelter. "She told me you were abusive," Adam said quietly. "I didn't want to believe it, but she's good at that, making you feel like you're her only hope." Nathan's chest burned. Old arguments replayed in his head. The tears, the half-truths, the way she'd twist the story just enough to stay the victim. Adam's voice cracked. "I just thought you should know. I'm sorry, man." Nathan stared at the dashboard, feeling something cold and final click into place. "Thanks for telling me. Good luck, brother," Adam said. Then the line went dead. Nathan sat there for a long time, phone heavy in his hand. The engine ticked in the cooling night. Somewhere behind his ribs, the last pieces of trust crumbled for good. When he pulled out of the lot, headlights cutting through the dusk, he wasn't sure what he'd do when he got home, but he knew Aaron wouldn't see him the same way ever again. Nathan drove the long way home. He took the back roads past the old mill, the dark fields stretching endless on either side. He needed the empty miles, the time to grind the betrayal down his chest, so he wouldn't explode the second he crossed his own threshold. He replayed Adam's voice in his head, the guilt, the shame, the quiet confirmation of what Nathan had suspected but didn't want to name. Erin hadn't changed. She hadn't come back to make amends. She'd come back because she'd run out of people to use. The truck's headlights carved out lonely slices of asphalt. Nathan gripped the wheel tighter. 5 years ago, he would have sworn Aaron was the one good thing he'd done right. Now, every memory felt warped. A story scribbled over with invisible ink, the truth bleeding through when it was too late to fix it. When he finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the soft glow from the living room window. Aaron was awake, waiting, maybe even planning the next thing to say, the next wide-eyed lie she'd feed him to buy another night under his roof. He killed the engine and sat there a moment, breath misting in the cab. He felt strangely calm, not numb like before, but clear, like anger and heartbreak had burned down to something solid and cold. Inside, Aaron was perched on the edge of the couch. She'd changed into one of his old t-shirts again, sleeves hanging off her shoulders like borrowed innocence. Her hair was damp. She'd showered. Another little piece of comfort she didn't deserve. "Hey," she said carefully when she saw him. "You're home late." Nathan didn't answer. He shut the door behind him and dropped his keys on the hall table. The thunk echoed in the room. Is something wrong? She stood up, pulling the hem of the shirt down like it could protect her from the truth crawling its way toward her. Nathan crossed his arms. He watched her, let the silence stretch until it felt like the walls might crack. Then he said, steady and low, "Where's Adam's credit card?" The color drained from her face. It was quick, a flicker of terror she tried to mask with a tiny, practiced smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." Nathan barked a humorless laugh. "Don't. Not tonight." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes darted to the hallway, like maybe she could run. But there was nowhere to go. Not this time. "You used him, Aaron, just like you used me. You ran out of lifelines, so you came crawling back here. Why? Did you think I was too soft to see you for what you are?" Her eyes welled up, but the tears didn't move him now. "Not anymore. Nate, please. Don't say my name." His voice cracked like thunder through the quiet room. Aaron shrank back, mouth trembling, but Nathan didn't feel pity. Just a final, brutal clarity. She'd broken him once, but he wouldn't let her do it again. Aaron's tears slipped free now, but Nathan didn't move to comfort her. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, a man anchored in the ruins of a home he'd once thought unshakable. She tried again, voice trembling. "Nathan, I didn't steal from him. I needed help. You'd shut me out. You don't know how it felt." "Oh, I know exactly how it felt." He cut in, calm but sharp enough to draw blood. "I know how it felt to wake up every day thinking I was loving someone who'd already decided I wasn't enough, who'd rather crawl in a bed with my father." He nearly spat the word. The old betrayal still alive under this new one, and then run off with a stranger's wallet when that didn't work out. She sank down onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "You don't understand." "No," Nathan said, voice like iron. "I finally do." He turned away, grabbing the small lockbox he kept near the coat closet, a leftover habit from when he'd trusted her too much to use it. He flipped it open, pulled out a thin envelope he'd tucked there weeks ago. Cash, just enough for an emergency. He tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. The envelope landed like a gavel. Final, unmistakable. "That's for a bus. Or a motel. I don't care which. But tomorrow, when I get home from work, you're gone. Understand?" Aaron looked up, eyes wide and wet. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Nate, please." He cut her off with a single raised hand. "I didn't make this choice, Aaron. You did. You chose it every time you lied. Every time you picked anyone else's bed, anyone else's pocket, over the truth." Her breath hitched, a raw, pitiful sound. "I can change." "No." He stepped closer, towering over her, so she couldn't pretend to look away. "You already did. And you can keep doing it, but not here. Not with me." For a moment, they just stared at each other, her shoulders shaking. His heart and iron door finally slammed shut. He didn't say another word. He just turned, grabbed his coat from the hook, and left her there, alone, for the first time in years, with nothing but the empty rooms echoing back all the lies she'd built her comfort on. Outside, the cold night met him like a promise. Nathan breathed it in deep, the crisp air cutting through the last of his doubt. Tomorrow, he thought, she'd be gone. And for the first time in a long time, he'd know exactly who was standing in this house when the door closed behind him. Nathan didn't go far. He walked down the street, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, letting the cold bite through the leftover anger simmering in his chest. Streetlights flickered over the cracked sidewalk, each pool of light catching pieces of his breath in the crisp air. He didn't want to be in that house tonight, not with her still inside, not with the ghosts rattling around every corner, laughter that wasn't real anymore, promises that tasted like rust when he bit down on them now. He ended up at a little diner that hadn't changed since he was a teenager. Red booths, flickering neon sign, and a coffee pot that never emptied no matter how late it got. He slid into a booth at the back, the cracked vinyl sticking to his jacket. The waitress, Patty, gave him a nod. She knew him, knew everyone. Small town curse. "Late night, Nate?" she asked, pouring him coffee before he even asked. "Something like that," he said. His voice was steady, but he could feel the adrenaline still humming just under his skin. Patty didn't pry. She never did. Just topped off his mug and wandered back behind the counter to hum along with the old jukebox. Nathan wrapped his hands around the mug and stared at the swirl of steam rising in the fluorescent light. Outside the window, the empty street reflected back at him. One man sitting alone with nothing but the thrum of regret and something new. Relief. Ugly, necessary relief. A few stools down, an old man coughed into his napkin, and Nathan's mind drifted. He wondered where Erin would go. Who'd she find next? Not my problem anymore, he reminded himself, but still scraped at something raw inside him. His phone buzzed on the table. For half a second, he thought it might be her. A final plea, a final lie to twist a knife. But it wasn't. It was a message from Marcus, his foreman. "Hey boss, you good? Didn't see you at the yard." Nathan almost laughed. The only thing steady in his life now was work. Steel and beams and paychecks that didn't lie. "I'm good," he texted back. "See you tomorrow." He drained the last of his coffee, the bitterness oddly comforting. Outside, the neon sign flickered again, casting the word "open" onto the wet sidewalk. Nathan pressed his palms to the tabletop, steadying himself on that word. Open. Maybe that's what he was now, in a way. Cracked wide open. No illusions left. No more pretending his love could fix what someone else was determined to break. And in that hollow, bruised space where her lies used to live, something small but solid was starting to grow. Freedom. Nathan stayed at the diner until the neon sign buzzed him back to life. He left a few bills tucked under his half-empty mug and nodded to Patty, who just gave him that knowing look. The kind that said, "I don't know your story, but I know how heavy it is." He stepped out into the cold again, the air slicing through the stale ache in his chest. By the time he made it back home, the neighborhood was asleep. Porch lights off, curtains drawn. His house glowed faintly from the living room window, a fragile warmth that felt like it didn't belong to him anymore. Inside, he found Erin where he'd left her, curled up on the couch, the envelope still clutched in her hands like a lifeline she was afraid to loosen her grip on. When he stepped in, she jolted upright, eyes wide, red-rimmed. "You came back," she whispered. Nathan hung his keys on the hook, shrugged out of his jacket. "I live here." She flinched like he'd slapped her with the truth. He almost pitied how small she looked now. The same woman who'd once filled every corner of this place with her laughter, her chaos, her promises. Now just a silhouette against his old couch. "I don't want her money," she said suddenly. The envelope rattled in her trembling hands. "I don't want it like this." Nathan stared at her. "You already took from everyone else. Why draw the line now?" Erin's face crumpled. "I messed up. I know that. But please, don't make me leave tonight. I have nowhere." He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, studying her like she was something fragile in a glass case he'd forgotten how to protect. "You have tonight, like I said. But tomorrow," he paused, letting the weight of it settle in the silence. "Tomorrow you're gone. That's not me being cruel, Erin. That's me finally being fair." She opened her mouth, maybe to beg again, maybe to spit out another half-true plea. But the words died when she saw there was no softness left in him. Nathan pushed away from the wall. "There's blankets in the hall closet. Take the couch. Don't come upstairs." She didn't answer, didn't nod, just sank back down, hugging the envelope to her chest like it could keep her warm through a night that felt longer than any she'd ever known. Nathan turned away and climbed the stairs. Each creak under his boots felt like a door closing behind him, one he wouldn't open again. At the top, he paused, glanced back at the slice of light spilling up from the living room. Part of him, the old, bruised part, wanted to turn back, to whisper it's okay. But that part was buried now, deep under the wreckage she'd left him to sweep alone. He shut the bedroom door gently, slid the bolt across, and let the silence of his own space wrap around him like a final promise. Tomorrow, this ends. Nathan lay on top of the covers that night, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun its slow, squeaking circles. He could hear her faintly below, the creak of the couch springs, the occasional muffled sob when she thought he was too far away to hear. Once upon a time, he would have rushed down, pulled her close, whispered that they'd figure it out, that they could fix it together, that he'd forgive anything, just to keep the picture of their life unbroken. But forgiveness had a cost he wasn't willing to pay anymore. Not when the lies were so deep they cracked the very floor under his feet. Around 3 a.m., he sat up and pulled the old shoebox from his closet. Inside were scraps of a life that seemed like it belonged to someone else now. Photos of them at the lake, a ticket stub from a road trip that ended in laughter and cheap motel sheets, a birthday card she'd given him once, promising him forever in looping cursive. He thumbed through it all, feeling each memory bend under the truth. It wasn't nostalgia anymore, it was evidence. Proof that you could build a life on a lie if you wanted it badly enough. Downstairs, a floorboard creaked. He froze, listening. Her footsteps padded to the kitchen, the tap of a glass on the counter, the low hum of the fridge. For a moment he imagined her standing there, the same way she'd done 100 nights before, pouring water in the dark, humming to herself like nothing in the world could touch her. But this time, the quiet didn't soothe him. It only made him feel how empty the house really was. How empty it had been even when she was still pretending to love him. He set the box aside, got up, and padded to the window. The street was dark and still. His truck was there, his one stubborn anchor. He thought of the weeks ahead, of the awkward questions his crew would ask, of how many people in town would guess pieces of the truth long before he ever admitted it out loud. He pressed his forehead to the glass, letting the chill steady him. Tomorrow she'd be gone. And what she took with her, she'd already stolen years ago. The man who'd bend, break, and forgive to keep her by his side. Downstairs, the fridge door shut. Footsteps crossed the living room, then silence again. Nathan closed his eyes and breathed in the cold, telling himself that silence was the only promise he could trust now. Morning came heavy and gray, a drizzle tapping at the window when Nathan opened his eyes. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sign that she'd already gone. But the house was still. No footsteps, no whisper of the front door opening and closing. He sat up, swung his feet to the floor, and let the chill seep through his skin until it made him move. He dressed slow, like he was bracing for a fight he'd already decided he wouldn't have. When he stepped downstairs, the living room looked just as he'd left it. Blankets tangled on the couch, the envelope of cash open on the coffee table. Erin was sitting cross-legged on the cushions, staring at her phone like she could will someone to rescue her through the cracked screen. She looked up when she heard him. Her eyes were puffy, her hair pulled back with one of his old flannel shirts draped over her shoulders. She looked small, not fragile, exactly, but shrunken by the weight of her own choices. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, her voice hoarse from a night of crying. We could figure it out, Nate. I know you. You're not like this." He almost laughed. "Not like this." Like what? Like someone who'd finally decided to stop letting her spin him in circles? Instead, he walked past her into the kitchen, filled the coffee pot, and waited for the burble and hiss to drown out the silence between them. "You did this, Erin," he said over his shoulder. "Calm. Final. You made your choice. And I made mine." She stood in the doorway, wringing her hands in the sleeves of his shirt. "I don't have anyone, Nathan. I don't have anywhere." He turned, met her eyes. "You had me. For years. You had everything. And you threw it away every time you thought no one was watching." She flinched, blinking hard. "He promised me." She cut herself off, as if she realized too late that admitting that only made it worse. Nathan shook his head, pouring his coffee. "Pack your things. The bus leaves every hour. You'll figure it out." She stared at him like she didn't know him anymore, like the man she'd always counted on to forgive and fix and forget had vanished overnight. Maybe he had. Nathan sipped his coffee, tasted the bitter edge that told him he could stand here forever and never feel that old weakness again. In the hallway, her bag sat half-zipped where she'd dropped it the night she came back. He watched her glance at it, then back at him, her eyes searching for the soft place in him that would let her stay. But he'd boarded that up for good. Erin stared at that bag like it might lunge at her if she touched it. Nathan leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee, watching the old clock on the wall tick the seconds away. He wasn't going to help her pack. Not this time. He wasn't going to say one soft word that might crack the cold resolve holding him upright. Finally, she bent down and began shoving her things inside. A sweater, a pair of old jeans she'd left behind before she'd vanished for Adam, and the half-truths that got her here again. She moved like someone sleepwalking through a dream turned nightmare. When she stood, bag slung over her shoulder, she looked at him one last time. "Where will I even go, Nate?" He didn't answer right away. He just set his empty mug in the sink and dried his hands on a dish towel. The small, ordinary motions of a man reclaiming his own quiet life, one piece at a time. "That's not my problem anymore," he said finally, meeting her eyes without flinching. She opened her mouth, closed it. For a heartbeat, he saw the girl he'd fallen for all those years ago. The girl with the sharp laugh and hungry dreams, who'd once promised she'd never run. And he almost felt the old pull to catch her one last time. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped aside so she could pass. Erin hesitated, then moved past him into the hall, her footsteps soft on the worn floorboards that used to carry their whispered secrets and late-night laughter. At the door, she turned, as if hoping he'd stop her, say come back in. Stay. But Nathan just stood there, arms folded, heart steady in his chest. "Goodbye, Erin," he said quietly. She lowered her eyes, pulled the door open. The cold air rushed in, clean, sharp, honest. She stepped out into it, the door clicking shut behind her with a sound that felt more like freedom than anything else. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He leaned against the wall, staring at the door like it might swing back open and undo everything he'd finally set right. But it didn't. In the silence, he could almost hear the house breathe, the old wood and walls settling into a new kind of quiet. A true quiet. His quiet. And as he stood there, alone in a home that felt like his again for the first time in years, Nathan let himself smile. Small, tired, but real. He was done patching holes in someone else's sinking boat. From here on out, he'd build his own. Nathan didn't move for a long time after the door closed. He just stood there, listening to the hush that spread through the house like fresh paint covering old stains. No muffled cries, no half-whispered excuses, no footsteps creeping around his trust. It was just him now. Him, the walls, the creak of the floor under his bare feet. It felt good, heavy in a way that promised something lighter would come if he just waited long enough. He poured another coffee and took it out onto the front porch. The dawn drizzle had cleared, leaving behind a gray sky that threatened more rain. He didn't care. He liked the smell of it, clean and cold, like the air after a storm when all the dirt washes down the gutters and out of sight. He sat on the old porch swing he'd built with his father before he'd learned what betrayal could look like under a familiar smile. He'd sanded every plank himself, painted it bright white, and Erin had once hung fairy lights around it for warm nights when they'd sit together in silence. That version of them felt so far away now, it was almost another man's memory. Nathan sipped his coffee, watching the street wake up. Cars rolling by, neighbors walking dogs, people who'd wave if they saw him, but never ask what really went on behind his front door. He liked it that way. His phone buzzed on the swing beside him. He picked it up, thumbed through the missed calls from friends who didn't know yet. Messages from coworkers asking if he'd make it to the weekend poker game. Life pushing on like nothing had changed. One message stood out. His sister, Kelly. "You good? Want company later?" He thought about it. About letting her come over. About telling her everything and letting her hold that hurt for him the way she always did when they were kids. Maybe later. For now, this stillness felt better than any comfort he could borrow. He typed back, "I'm good. Rain check." The swing creaked as he leaned back. The street hummed with the ordinary buzz of a world that didn't know a woman had packed up the last rotten parts of his heart and walked away with them. Good, he thought. Let it be ordinary. Let it be boring and small, and just as again. He drained the mug, set it on the railing, and sat there as the morning swallowed the last ghost of her perfume drifting from the doorway. Some endings didn't need fireworks. Some just needed silence to grow into something worth trusting again. Nathan stayed on that porch swing until the sky shifted from gray to the pale blue of an ordinary afternoon. It felt like a confession, this sitting still, like he was telling the world he wasn't running from the wreckage she'd left behind. Inside, the house felt bigger than it had in years. No purse tossed on the table, no shoes by the door that weren't his, no half-finished glass of wine on the counter, lipstick smudged like a careless signature on his life. Just him. And that felt like freedom disguised as emptiness. After a while, he went back inside. He gathered the blankets she'd used on the couch, stuffing them into the washer like he could scrub her scent out of the threads. He vacuumed the living room twice, even though there wasn't much to pick up, just a few strands of her hair that clung stubbornly to the carpet. When he found her old mug in the sink, he held it for a second. It was the one she always claimed. The chipped green ceramic he'd bought on a road trip to Colorado when they were still pretending they'd last forever. He almost threw it out, but instead he rinsed it, dried it, and packed it in a box with the rest of the small things she'd left behind. It wasn't anger that made him do it, just the need to clear the space. A house wasn't a graveyard for broken promises. He refused to let it be. By evening, he'd made a dent. The laundry spun in the background. The kitchen counters gleamed. He poured himself a whiskey, not to drown anything out, but to toast the simple truth that he'd survived her storms. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping slow, his eyes drifting to the dark window where his reflection looked back at him. Older, sure, but clearer too. He knew tomorrow people would talk. Small towns always did. They'd whisper about the perfect couple that wasn't so perfect after all. They'd guess about the betrayal, the money, the pieces they'd never really see. Let them. Nathan tipped his glass to the window, the reflection of a man rebuilding. Board by board, promise by promise, this time only with himself. And for the first time in too long, he knew exactly who he'd be when the sun came up. Nathan sat at that kitchen table long after the whiskey turned warm in his glass. The clock ticked out the last hours of daylight, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound in a house that finally felt honest. Empty, but honest. He thought about Erin somewhere out there, maybe sitting in a bus station with her lies packed into that cheap duffel, replaying her choices like a scratched record that couldn't find the right note. He wondered if she'd blame him or herself when the ache of what she'd thrown away finally caught up. Maybe both. Maybe neither. It didn't really matter now. He got up and walked through the house, flicking on lamps as dusk settled in. Each pool of light felt like staking a new claim. This is mine. This too. And this. He opened the windows to let the night air wash through every corner she'd once filled with her secrets. The curtains fluttered like they were taking a breath with him. When his phone buzzed again, it was Kelly. "Still good," she wrote. Nathan smiled at that. His sister, always checking, always ready to swing by with cheap wine and tough love if he cracked even a little. He typed back, "I'm good. Really." And for the first time, it felt true. He stepped out onto the porch again, the swing creaking under his weight. The neighborhood was quiet, porch lights glowing in rows like distant stars. He let the breeze move through him, carrying the last shreds of doubt off into the dark. Tomorrow he'd go back to work. He'd pour his strength into steel beams and concrete slabs. Things that stayed where you set them. Things that couldn't whisper and cheat behind your back. And when he came home, it would be to a house that didn't lie. He raised his glass to the street. Not to Erin, not to the past, but to the space she'd left behind. Space he could fill with whatever he wanted now. Neighbors walked by with dogs, glanced his way, maybe guessed a piece of what had happened behind these walls. Nathan didn't flinch. Let them wonder. Inside the house, the washer buzzed its final cycle. Clean blankets. Fresh start. Nathan closed his eyes and let the night wrap around him, heavy but gentle. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime clinked out a tune that almost made him laugh. Freedom had a funny sound, quiet, hollow, waiting to be filled with something better. He leaned back, let the swing rock him slow, and let his new life begin. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who loves raw, real tales of heartbreak and new beginnings. See you in the next one.